The metal tray slipped. It was a conscious decision, a micro-adjustment of the muscles in her forearm, a relaxation of a grip that could crush steel. A choice. The clatter was explosive in the tense quiet of the emergency room. A cacophony of stainless steel, glass vials, and plastic syringes skittering across the polished linoleum. Heads turned, every single one, nurses, orderlies, a few patients in the waiting area. Their eyes, a mix of pity and annoyance, all landed on her. Nurse Alara Vance. Ellie. She flinched, a practiced theatrical cringe that pulled her shoulders up to her ears. Her hands fluttered near her face, trembling. The tremble was real, but not for the reason they thought. It was the vibration of a finely tuned engine forced to idle at a dangerously low RPM. "Vance!" The voice was a scalpel, sharp and cold. Dr. Julian Evans. He stood by the main desk, a tablet in one hand, his face a mask of supreme irritation. He was a man carved from sharp angles and condescension, his white coat pristine, his posture radiating an authority he never let anyone forget. "Honestly, can you do anything without creating a disaster?" he asked. The question was not a question. It was a statement, a verdict. Ellie ducked her head, letting her mousy brown hair fall across her face, a shield. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Evans. It slipped." Her voice was a whisper, thin and reedy, the voice of a mouse. She had practiced that voice for 3 years, in front of mirrors, into digital recorders, pitch, timbre, hesitation. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. "It always just slips, Vance," he sneered, turning his attention back to his tablet as if she were no longer worth the visual bandwidth. "Clean it up, and try not to contaminate the entire floor this time." "Yes, doctor. Sorry, doctor." She knelt, her movements deliberately clumsy. Her oversized blue scrubs, a size too large to hide the lean corded muscle beneath, bunched around her knees. She began picking up the debris, her gaze downcast. Humiliation. It was a bitter pill, but a necessary one. It was the price of anonymity, the cost of peace. An older nurse, Maria, came over with a dustpan and brush, her expression soft with sympathy. "Here, sweetie, don't mind him. He was born with a bug up his behind." "Thanks, Maria," Ellie mumbled, grateful for the kindness, but hating it too. Pity was just another cage. As she swept the last of the broken glass into the pan, her sleeve rode up her forearm, just for a second. Exposed on the pale skin was a scar, a jagged, puckered line of silvery tissue shaped like a lightning strike. It started near her wrist and disappeared under the blue fabric of her scrubs. Old habit. She tugged the sleeve down instantly. Old discipline. The scar didn't itch. Not today. But she felt it. A cold phantom, a reminder of fire and screaming and the weight of a life she had carried out of hell. A life she had supposedly left behind. She was Nurse Vance, clumsy, anxious, forgettable, small and unassuming, just another face in the chaotic blur of a busy city hospital. 5'5" if she stood up straight, which she never did. Her posture was a lie. Her trembling hands were a lie. Her quiet, hesitant voice was a lie. Her entire life was a carefully constructed fiction, a cover story written in drop trays and apologies. She disposed of the mess, her hands moving with false uncertainty, but her eyes, shielded by her hair, missed nothing. The security guard at the entrance, Davis, shifted his weight, left foot to right, a slight limp, old injury, probably his right knee. He scanned the waiting room with a lazy sweep, but his gaze lingered a half-second too long on the man in the corner with the bulky jacket. An old cop or ex-military. The kind of observation that was instinct, not training. Davis was good. The ticking clock on the wall, the subtle hum of the ventilation system, the faint rhythmic beep of a heart monitor in Bay 3, steady at 78 beats per minute. Details. Always the details. Her mind was a targeting system, constantly acquiring and analyzing data. It was a curse she couldn't switch off, the part of her that was not Nurse Vance, the part that was Valkyrie. But Valkyrie was dead, killed in action. A name on a memorial wall somewhere, redacted and classified. A ghost. A legend, whispered by a select few who were now either old, retired, or buried. Ellie finished cleaning, her heart rate a placid 60 beats per minute. The internal storm was perfectly contained. The act was everything. She returned to the nurse's station, keeping her head down. She picked up a chart, pretending to read it. The words were a meaningless jumble. Her focus was on the ambient noise of the ER, filtering it for threats. A child crying, a man coughing, the squeak of gurney wheels. Normal. Safe. Dr. Evans walked past her, his cologne a sharp antiseptic wave. He didn't even glance at her. She was a piece of furniture, an incompetent, inconvenient piece of furniture. Good. That was the goal. She felt a prickle on her arm. The scar. It was a liar's tell. It always knew when the piece was about to break. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second, before she forced the meekness back into them. Nothing. Just the same controlled chaos of a Tuesday afternoon. She was being paranoid. The past was a locked room. She had the only key, and she had thrown it away, or so she told herself. But the foundations of the hospital were beginning to vibrate, a low, deep thrumming that wasn't in the building's structure. It was in the air. Thump, 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 growing louder. Maria looked up from her computer, frowning. Is that a helicopter? Davis, the security guard, was already moving towards the ambulance bay doors, his hand resting near his hip. The lazy posture was gone. He was alert. The thrumming became a roar, a physical pressure that rattled the windows in their frames. It was the sound of military-grade hardware, the heavy percussive beat of a Black Hawk helicopter, not a medivac. This was different. This was the sound of inbound trouble. The scar on Ellie's arm began to burn. The doors to the ambulance bay burst open. It wasn't a paramedic who entered. It was a soldier, full combat gear, rifle held in a low-ready position. His eyes, hidden behind ballistic sunglasses, swept the room in a single professional arc. Behind him, 2 more soldiers followed, flanking a gurney that was being pushed by a frantic-looking flight medic. On the gurney was a man, late 50s, maybe 60. Graying hair, a strong jawline, but his face was contorted in a mask of agony and confusion. An IV line ran into his arm, the bag held high by one of the soldiers. He was strapped down, but he fought against the restraints, his body arching. Dr. Evans, for once, was shocked into silence. He stood, tablet forgotten, staring at the military invasion of his domain. One of the soldiers, an officer by the insignia on his collar, strode directly to him. Dr. Evans? I'm Major Kincaid. This is Admiral Marcus Thorne. We have a priority 1 medical emergency. Admiral. The word echoed in the sudden tomb-like silence of the ER. Ellie felt the blood drain from her face. She shrank back, trying to make herself smaller, to melt into the beige wall behind her. Thorne. Marcus Thorne. It couldn't be. She risked a glance at the man on the gurney. He thrashed, his head whipping from side to side. A raw, guttural sound tore from his throat. Get him into the trauma bay. Now! Evans finally found his voice, snapping into action. He pointed towards Trauma 1. What happened? What are his vitals? He collapsed during a briefing an hour ago, Major Kincaid said, his voice tight as he and his men maneuvered the gurney. Massive neurological event, origin unknown. He's been in and out of consciousness, extremely combative. Vitals are all over the place. Blood pressure is spiking over 220. As they moved past the nurse's station, the Admiral's eyes snapped open. They were wild, unfocused. Blue eyes, Ellie remembered, clear and steady. Now they were storms of pure panic. He wasn't seeing the ER. He was seeing something else, somewhere else. Incoming, he screamed, his voice raw with terror. Get down! Vulture is hit! Vulture is down! The name hit Ellie like a physical blow. Vulture, the call sign of her team's pilot, 15 years ago. She stumbled back a step, a genuine tremor running through her. This wasn't an act. The locked room in her mind had just been breached. The door kicked off its hinges. The soldiers and hospital staff wrestled the gurney into Trauma 1. The curtain was ripped shut, but the sounds carried. Shouting, the clang of metal, the Admiral's tormented cries. No, they're everywhere! The tree line! Light 'em up! He was reliving it. The ambush in the Al-Qadir Valley. The day Valkyrie died. The day Ellie Vance was born from the ashes. Vance! Evans's voice, sharp and angry, cut through the curtain. Get in here! We need hands! Ellie froze. Her training, her deepest instincts, screamed at her to run, to disappear. He couldn't see her. He couldn't know her. "Did you hear me? Move!" Maria gave her a gentle push. "Go on, honey. He needs you. He needs you." The words were an echo from another lifetime. Her feet felt like lead, but she forced them to move. One step, then another. She pushed through the curtain into Trauma 1. The scene was chaos. Admiral Thorne was fighting with the strength of a man half his age. Two of the massive soldiers were struggling to hold him down. A nurse was trying to get a blood pressure cuff on his arm, but he kept tearing it away. "Sedate him," Evans ordered. "Give me 10 of diazepam now." "We tried, sir," the flight medic said, his face pale. "It's like pouring water on a fire. Nothing is touching him." Thorne's head snapped towards Ellie. His eyes were wide, blind with memory. He wasn't seeing a meek nurse. He was seeing ghosts. "They got the captain," he roared, his voice cracking with a 15-year-old grief. "Leave me. Get the intel. Go." He was repeating his own orders, the orders he had given her. Ellie's breath hitched. Her carefully constructed persona was cracking, hairline fractures spreading through the facade. "I need a line in him. He's going to stroke out," Evans yelled, his own professional composure fraying. He tried to approach the Admiral, but Thorne bucked violently, almost throwing one of the soldiers off him. "Stay back! They're wearing our uniforms!" the Admiral screamed, his eyes locking on Evans's white coat. "Compromised! It's a trap!" Evans recoiled, his face a mixture of fear and fury. His authority was gone. He was a civilian in a war zone he couldn't comprehend. He was failing. Ellie stood by the edge of the room, invisible. Her mind was a whirlwind. Protocol dictates non-engagement. Maintain cover at all costs. You are a ghost. You are not here. But her body was already moving. The years of forced hesitation, of practiced meekness, fell away like a snake shedding its skin. She saw the situation with absolute clarity. The Admiral's hypertensive crisis was being fueled by a PTSD-induced dissociative state. His body was reacting to the trauma of the ambush as if it were happening right now. The drugs weren't working because his adrenaline and cortisol levels were too high for them to find purchase. You couldn't medicate a memory. You had to break the loop. "Vance, what are you doing? Get out of the way," Evans barked, seeing her step forward. She ignored him. Her movements were fluid, economical, no wasted energy. She walked to the side of the gurney, into the Admiral's direct line of sight. The soldiers tensed, ready to restrain her too. Major Kincaid took a step to intercept. "Ma'am, step back," he ordered, his voice low and firm. Ellie didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on Admiral Thorne. She saw the terror in his eyes, the same terror she remembered from that dusty, blood-soaked valley. She raised a hand, not in a threatening way, a gesture to halt. "Stand down," she said. The words were quiet, not a whisper. They were spoken with a low, resonant authority that cut through the noise like a laser. The voice was not Ellie Vance's. It was the voice of a commander, the voice of Valkyrie. Every person in the room froze. The soldiers, the nurses, Dr. Evans. They all stopped what they were doing and stared at her. The shift in her presence was so total, so instantaneous, it was like a physical shockwave. Her posture had changed. She was no longer hunched. She stood straight, her shoulders back, her chin up. She seemed taller, denser. The clumsy nurse was gone. In her place stood a soldier. Admiral Thorne stopped thrashing, his wild eyes fixed on her. The screaming stopped. He panted, his chest heaving, but he was listening. "Ma'am," Major Kincaid repeated, confused. Ellie ignored him. She looked directly into the Admiral's eyes. "Captain Thorne," she said, her voice calm and steady. She used his rank from 15 years ago. "Report." The Admiral blinked. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Who is that?" he rasped. "Identify yourself," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. He swallowed, his training kicking in, a reflex buried deeper than the terror. "Captain Marcus Thorne. Serial number." He rattled it off, the numbers clear and precise despite his ragged breathing. "Mission," she pressed. "Operation Sundown," he whispered, the name of the classified operation. A gasp came from Major Kincaid. That operation was sealed, top secret, buried. "What is the situation, Captain?" Ellie continued, her voice a lifeline in his storm. "Ambush. We're pinned down. Vulture is down. The package is compromised. I'm blind. My eyes." I can't see." He was slipping back, his hands coming up to his face. In the ambush, shrapnel had temporarily blinded him. This was the critical moment. The loop. Ellie leaned closer. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was firm, grounding, deliberate. Then she leaned in close to his ear, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but a whisper that carried the weight of command. "Negative, Captain. The package is secure." "I have it." She paused, then delivered the key. The code that would break the feedback loop. The call sign only he and she would know. "Valkyrie has the package. I say again, Valkyrie has the package." The effect was instantaneous. Admiral Thorne's body went completely still. The fight drained out of him as if a switch had been flipped. His breathing hitched, then steadied. The wild terror in his eyes receded, replaced by a vast, bottomless shock. He turned his head slowly, his eyes no longer blind, focusing on her face for the first time. Really seeing her. "Valkyrie." He breathed the name. It was not a question. It was a prayer, a recognition. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the beep of the heart monitor, which had begun a steady downward trend. 190, 175, 150. Dr. Evans stood with his mouth agape, his face pale. He looked from the now calm admiral to the unassuming nurse who had just performed a feat of medical and psychological de-escalation that was nothing short of miraculous. The soldiers stared at her, their professional composure shattered. They had been trying to solve the problem with force. She had solved it with a word. Ellie pulled her hand back from the admiral's shoulder. She straightened up, and in that moment, the mask of Nurse Vance slid back into place. Her shoulders slumped, her head ducked. She looked down at the floor, her hands beginning to tremble again. This time, the tremor was real. "His blood pressure is stabilizing," she mumbled, her voice once again thin and reedy. "You should be able to get a line in now." She had just broken every rule. She had ripped a hole in her cover story big enough to fly a Black Hawk through. The cost of peace had just become impossibly high. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tableau held: the stunned doctor, the bewildered soldiers, the calm admiral staring at the floor where Ellie's gaze was fixed. Major Kincaid was the first to break the silence. He took a slow step towards her, his eyes narrowed, no longer seeing a clumsy nurse but a profound and dangerous mystery. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and intense. Ellie flinched, the genuine reaction of a cornered animal. I'm Nurse Vance," she stammered. I heard him talking about military stuff. I have a cousin in the army. I guess I picked some of it up." It was a pathetic lie. Laughable. It wouldn't fool a child, let alone a seasoned special operations officer. She was trying to put the genie back in the bottle, but the room was already full of smoke. Dr. Evans found his voice, a choked, incredulous sound. What did you do?" He pointed a shaking finger at her. "How did you know that name? Valkyrie?" "I don't know," she lied, shaking her head, widening her eyes in feigned confusion. I think he said it first. I just repeated it back to him, to, build a rapport." She was digging her own grave. Every word was another shovelful of dirt. Admiral Thorne, his voice weak but clear, cut through her desperate attempts at deflection. "No," he said, his eyes never leaving her. She said it. She knew. He pushed himself up on his elbows. The soldiers, who seconds before had been fighting to hold him down, now watched him with a kind of reverence. "It's you," the admiral whispered, his gaze tracing the lines of her face, trying to reconcile the image of the meek nurse with the memory burned into his mind, the memory of a fierce, dirt-streaked warrior who had carried him through smoke and fire. "It's really you. They said you were dead." Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The end of her quiet life. The past had not just knocked on the door, it had kicked it down and was holding her at gunpoint. "I think he's still confused," she said, her voice trembling. She took a step back towards the curtain, towards escape. "The medication must be starting to work." "Stop," Major Kincaid commanded. It wasn't a request. She froze, her back to him. "Turn around, slowly," he said. She did as she was told, her movements stiff. She kept her eyes on the floor, unable to meet his gaze. He walked around her, circling like a wolf inspecting a strange new creature in its territory. He stopped in front of her. "Let me see your arm," he said. "What?" she squeaked. "Your left forearm," he clarified, his voice like granite. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her. The scar. He couldn't have known about the scar. It wasn't in any official report. It was a detail only a survivor would know. Had Thorne talked about it? I don't understand," she whispered. "Vance, just show him your arm so we can get back to treating our patient," Dr. Evans snapped, his arrogance beginning to reassert itself, a flimsy shield against his own confusion and humiliation. Ellie's mind raced. Refuse, and it was an admission of guilt. Comply, and it was confirmation. There was no way out. Old habit, old discipline. When cornered, create a new exit. But there were no exits here, only a choice between two kinds of destruction. With a hand that truly was shaking now, she reached down and slowly, reluctantly, pushed up the sleeve of her left scrub top. The room went silent again. The jagged, silvery lightning bolt of a scar stood out starkly against her pale skin, a permanent record of failure and survival. Major Kincaid stared at it, his breath hissed out between his teeth. "The Admiral. He talked about it during the flight," Kincaid murmured, almost to himself. "He kept saying, 'The Valkyrie was marked by lightning.' I thought he was delirious. A metaphor." He looked up from the scar to her face. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "Sergeant First Class Elena Petrova," he said, the name a ghost on his lips. "Call sign, Valkyrie. 75th Ranger Regiment Special Operations Detachment, listed KIA, Al-Qadir Valley, 15 years ago, the sole survivor of Task Force Vulture." He knew. He knew her real name. It wasn't in a file. It was legend. Ellie felt the floor drop out from under her. Elena Petrova was a dead woman, a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in a decade and a half. She yanked her sleeve down, a futile gesture of concealment. "I don't know who that is," she insisted, her voice breaking. "My name is Alara Vance." "The hell it is," Kincaid shot back, his voice ringing with certainty. He pointed at the Admiral. "You just saved his life by pulling a memory out of his head from a classified operation that got your entire team killed. You have a scar that was only ever a rumor in the Spec Ops community. You are not a nurse." Suddenly, a new alarm began to blare, a piercing, rhythmic shriek, the code blue alert. "Bay 5! Patient is coding!" a nurse yelled from outside the curtain. The emergency broke the spell. Years of training took over for everyone. "I'll go," Maria, the older nurse, said, already moving. "No, I need you here to get labs on the Admiral," Evans commanded, trying to reclaim his ER. He looked around, his eyes skipping over Ellie, then landing on her with reluctant necessity. "Vance, you're closest. Get in there. Start compressions." It was a test, a demand, and a new crisis. Ellie hesitated for a heartbeat. This was her chance. She could run, just walk out the door and never look back, disappear again. Start over. New name, new city, new lie. But then she heard the sounds from Bay 5. The flatline tone, the panicked shouts. A life was slipping away. The instinct to save was deeper than the instinct to hide. It was the one part of her that was true in both of her lives. She moved. She didn't run. She flowed. A swift, silent current of purpose. She burst through the curtain into Bay 5. An elderly man was on the bed, his face blue, his body still. A young resident was fumbling with the defibrillator paddles, his hands shaking. "I can't get a rhythm," he said, his voice high with panic. Ellie didn't speak. She shoved him aside, not with malice, but with pure efficiency. Her hands went to the man's chest. "Starting compressions," she said. Her voice was clear, calm, and utterly authoritative. The Ellie Vance voice was gone again. She locked her elbows, her body a perfect piston. The compressions were deep, fast, rhythmic. 100 to 120 a minute. The bed frame creaked with the force. It was mechanically perfect. This was not the movement of a clumsy nurse who got lucky. This was the work of an expert. Dr. Evans had followed her, drawn by the crisis. He stood at the entrance to the bay, watching. His jaw was tight. "Charge to 200, Ellie commanded the resident, not taking her eyes off her hands, off the patient's chest. "Clear." The resident, startled by her tone, obeyed instantly. He charged the machine. "Charged! Hands off!" Ellie ordered. She removed her hands and the resident placed the paddles. "Clear," he said, and pressed the buttons. The man's body jumped. Ellie's eyes were already on the monitor. No change. Resume compressions, she said, her hands immediately back in place, pumping life back into the body. Push one of epi. Get me an airway tray. The orders came fast, precise, and correct. She wasn't asking. She was commanding the room. The nurses and the resident, caught in the gravity of her competence, obeyed without question. They moved faster, more efficiently than they had moments before. Dr. Evans watched, his expression unreadable. He had given her an order, expecting her to fumble, to prove his assessment of her correct. Instead, she had taken over the entire code, running it with a level of skill he had only ever seen in seasoned attending physicians. She was diagnosing and treating simultaneously. His pupils are blown, left side is sluggish. This isn't just cardiac. Get me a crash cart with a stroke kit. We have a rhythm, the resident shouted, pointing at the monitor. A weak, thready beat had appeared. Sinus bradycardia. It's not enough, Ellie said. He's throwing a clot. Where's that kit? A nurse ran in with it. Ellie ripped it open, her hands a blur of motion. She scanned the contents, her mind processing options at a speed that was terrifying. We need to push TPA. What's his history? Any recent surgery? Bleeding disorders? She fired at the nurse who had been assigned to the patient. The nurse frantically flipped through the chart. No, nothing. Get Dr. Evans to sign off on the TPA now, Ellie commanded, still performing compressions, not even breathing hard. The nurse looked at Evans, who was still standing, frozen, in the doorway. He was the attending physician. The decision was his. But he hadn't made it. She had. He stared at Ellie, at this impossible contradictory woman, this clumsy mouse who commanded a room like a general and diagnosed a stroke in the middle of a cardiac arrest. He saw the certainty in her eyes, the absolute, unshakable confidence. It was a confidence he, in that moment, realized he lacked. He nodded, his voice hoarse. Do it. Push the TPA. The order was given. The drug was administered. For a long minute, nothing happened. Ellie continued compressions, her face a mask of intense concentration. Then, the rhythm on the monitor strengthened. Color began to return to the man's face. His eyelids fluttered. Ellie stopped compressions. She placed 2 fingers on the man's neck, feeling for a carotid pulse. Strong, regular pulse, she announced. She looked at the monitor. Normal sinus rhythm. We got him back. The collective breath that the room had been holding was released in a sigh of relief. Ellie stepped back from the bed, the adrenaline beginning to fade. And as it did, the weight of what she had done crashed down on her. 2 crises, 2 revelations. The first had been a crack in her cover. This was a demolition. She looked up and saw them all staring at her. The nurses, the resident she had shoved aside, and Dr. Evans. His face was a complex canvas of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, terrible respect. Behind him, in the doorway, stood Major Kincaid and the security guard, Davis. Davis, the ex-Marine, was looking at her hands, her posture, her stance. He was looking at her the way a soldier looks at an officer. He knew. Her cover was not just blown, it was vaporized. She had nowhere left to hide. She turned and walked out of the bay, pushing past them all. She needed air. She needed to think. But her mind was white noise. She walked down the hallway, her pace quickening, ignoring the calls of her name behind her. She pushed open the doors to a supply closet and slipped inside, plunging herself into darkness. She leaned her back against the cool metal shelves, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. The tremble was back, racking her entire body. It was over. 3 years of peace, bought with 1,000 small humiliations, gone in 10 minutes. The scar on her arm burned as if it were fresh. She heard footsteps approaching outside the closet door. They stopped. A brief pause, then a soft knock. Ellie? It was Maria's voice, soft, gentle. Are you okay? Ellie didn't answer. She squeezed her eyes shut. Go away, please, just go away. The doorknob turned. The door opened a crack, spilling a sliver of hallway light into the darkness. Maria's face appeared in the gap. I knew it, Maria said, her voice full of a strange, quiet awe. I knew there was more to you. The way you organize the supplies, the way you tie your knots, little things. Perfect, too perfect for someone clumsy. She opened the door wider and stepped inside, closing it behind her. She didn't turn on the light. She sat on the floor a few feet from Ellie, a silent, supportive presence. "You don't have to talk," Maria said, "but you can't hide in a closet forever. They know." "I have to go," Ellie whispered, her voice raw. "I need to disappear." "And go where?" Maria asked gently. "Start all over again, dropping trays and letting pompous fools like Evans yell at you? For how long? Until the next Admiral Thorne shows up?" Maria was right. It wasn't a sustainable life. It was a prison sentence she had imposed on herself. "That man in there," Maria continued, "Admiral Thorne, he looks at you like you're a ghost he's been waiting for his whole life." The door opened again, this time without a knock. Major Kincaid filled the doorway, his large frame blocking out the light. He wasn't looking at Ellie, he was looking at the hallway behind him. "We have a problem," he said, his voice grim. "A big one." Ellie looked up, her personal crisis momentarily forgotten, replaced by the familiar cold dread of an impending threat. "What is it?" Her voice was steady again. "The Admiral," Kincaid said, finally meeting her eyes. In one of his lucid moments just now, he said one more thing. He said the ambush, Operation Sundown. It wasn't random. It was a setup. He was targeted. And the people who wanted him dead then are still out there. Ellie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air-conditioned closet. Why would he be a target? He was the package, Kincaid said. He was an intelligence officer. He had uncovered a mole, a high-ranking official selling secrets to a rival nation. He was on his way to deliver the proof when his transport was shot down. Everyone thought the proof died with the rest of your team. But it didn't, Ellie finished, the pieces clicking into place with sickening speed. He is the proof, his memory of who the mole was. Exactly, Kincaid nodded. And his neurological event today? Not natural. The flight medic found a trace of a novel neurotoxin in his system, undetectable by most standard tests. It was designed to induce a massive stroke or cardiac event, make it look natural. But it backfired. Instead of killing him, it triggered the PTSD and brought him here. To her. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Which means, Kincaid continued, his voice dropping lower, that whoever tried to kill him knows they failed, and they know where he is. The hospital was no longer a sanctuary. It was a target. Before Ellie could process the full weight of that, another figure appeared in the doorway behind Kincaid. A man in a tailored black suit that did nothing to hide the lean, predatory build beneath. His face was sharp, intelligent, and deeply familiar. "He's right, Elena," the man said. Ellie's blood ran cold. It was Commander Jarek, her former handler from the agency, the man who had managed her operations, the man who had signed her death certificate. "Jarek," she breathed. He gave a thin, mirthless smile. "In the flesh. I was wondering when you'd finally surface. We lost track of you after you went dark in Geneva 2 years ago." "You were tracking me?" she asked, a surge of anger cutting through her shock. "Always," he replied simply. "A promise I made to myself, in case we ever needed you again." He glanced at Major Kincaid. "It seems again is now." Jarek stepped into the closet, his presence dominating the small space. Maria, sensing the shift, wisely got up and slipped out, giving Ellie a final worried look. "Let's dispense with the reunion pleasantries," Jarek said, his tone all business. "Kincaid has given you the broad strokes. Let me fill in the details." He leaned against the opposite shelf, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "The mole Admiral Thorne identified 15 years ago was never caught. We suspected, but couldn't prove. He's now the Deputy Director of National Intelligence. His name is Robert Hemlock." The name meant nothing to Ellie. He was just another suit, another faceless enemy. "Thorne was recently appointed to a new oversight committee," Jarek continued. "He started digging into old files, connecting new dots to old betrayals. Hemlock must have gotten spooked. He decided to tie up his last loose end. He used a proprietary chemical weapon developed in a black site lab he controls. He wanted Thorne dead before he could testify. So he sent assassins," Ellie stated, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. "He will," Jarek corrected. "The neurotoxin was Plan A. Quiet, clean, deniable. Now that it's failed, he'll move to Plan B, a wet work team. Professionals. They'll hit this hospital and they'll do it fast. Their goal, will be to eliminate Thorne and anyone who might have heard what he said. That includes you." He paused, letting the reality of the situation sink in. "They won't be wearing uniforms. They'll look like civilians, or maybe even hospital staff. They'll use the chaos of this place as cover." Ellie's gaze went distant. Her mind was already mapping the hospital. Entry points, exits, fields of fire, choke points, the ER ambulance bay, the main entrance, the staff entrances, the helipad on the roof. Too many variables. Too many civilians. "What are our assets?" she asked. The question came out before she even realized she had decided to act. The part of her that was Valkyrie had already taken command. Jarek's thin smile returned. "There she is. I was wondering how much of that nurse nonsense you'd actually internalized." He gestured to Kincaid. "You have Major Kincaid and his 3 men. They're Delta, top tier. They are securing the Admiral's room as we speak." He then glanced out the door, where the security guard, Davis, was standing watch, his posture rigid. "You have him, former Marine Force Recon. He saw you work the Code Blue. He knows what you are. He's already on our side." 5 operators against a professional hit team in a civilian hospital, Ellie summarized. "Bad odds." "The odds are always bad, Elena," Jarek said. "That's why they call you." "Don't call me that," she snapped. "Elena Petrova is dead." "Is she?" Jarek countered, his voice soft. "Then who am I talking to? Nurse Vance? I don't think Nurse Vance knows how to calculate kill zones in a hospital hallway." He was right. The fiction was dead. She had to accept it. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice hard. "My men are on their way," Jarek said. "A full tactical response team. But they're 20 minutes out. Hemlock's team will be here before that. They'll move fast to capitalize on the window of opportunity. You don't have 20 minutes. You have 5. Maybe 10. 10 minutes to turn a place of healing into a fortress." "Your job," Jarek stated, "is to keep Admiral Thorne alive until my team arrives. Do whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Ellie repeated. The words were an old, familiar vow. They tasted of ash and cordite. She pushed herself up from the floor. Her body felt different. The feigned weakness was gone, replaced by a coiled, dangerous energy. The huntress was awake. She walked out of the closet, blinking in the bright fluorescent light of the hallway. Dr. Evans was standing there, looking lost. His ER was no longer his. He was a bystander in a war he hadn't known was being waged. Ellie walked straight up to him. "I need you to declare a hospital-wide lockdown," she said. Her voice was the one she'd used in the trauma bay, the voice of command. "No one in or out. Code Silver. Active threat." Evans stared at her, dumbfounded. "On what authority?" "On the authority that says we're all about to be killed if you don't," she shot back, her patience gone. She turned to Davis. "Davis, you're with me. We need to control the entrances." Davis nodded, his eyes alight with a renewed sense of purpose. "Yes, ma'am." He fell into step beside her without hesitation. "Ma'am?" Evans sputtered, utterly bewildered by the shift in dynamics. Ellie was already moving. "Kincaid," she called out, her voice echoing in the suddenly quiet ER. "Status report." Kincaid appeared at the door of the trauma bay. "Admiral is stable. We've barricaded the door. We're holding here." "Good. You're the last line of defense," Ellie said. "Davis and I will take the main ER entrance. Jarek, I need eyes. Get on the hospital security cameras. Be my overwatch. Call out enemy movement." "Already on it," Jarek said, pulling a tablet from his jacket and tapping into the system with practiced ease. Ellie scanned the ER, the patients, the staff. They were all liabilities, lambs in a slaughterhouse. "Maria," Ellie called. The older nurse hurried over. "Get everyone you can. Staff, walking wounded. Move them to the cafeteria in the basement. It's the most defensible location. And stay there. Lock the doors." Maria just nodded, her face pale but determined, and began to rally the others. Ellie turned to Davis. "The main entrance. They'll likely come through there, a frontal assault to create chaos." "It's all glass doors," Davis noted. "No real cover." "Then we make our own," Ellie said. Her eyes scanned the room. Gurneys, heavy supply carts, medical equipment. "Help me move these," she ordered, and together they began shoving heavy objects in front of the glass doors, creating a makeshift barricade. Her movements were a blur of efficiency. The years of pretending to be weak had been a constant state of resistance, like holding a beach ball underwater. Now, released, the power was explosive. Section. She felt alive. And she hated it. Just as they moved the last gurney into place, Jarek's voice came from his tablet, tinny and urgent. Lobby cameras, 4 individuals, dark jackets, carrying gym bags. They just bypassed the front desk. They're heading your way. They're here, Ellie said to Davis, her voice dropping. She pulled a trauma shear from her pocket, a glorified pair of scissors. It wasn't a weapon, but it would have to do. Davis drew his service pistol, a standard-issue 9mm. Stay behind the cover, she told him. Fire only when you have a clear target. Aim for center mass. The first of the glass doors shattered. A stun grenade flew through the opening, arcing through the air. "Grenade!" Ellie yelled, instinct taking over. She tackled Davis, pulling them both behind a heavy steel instrument cart just as the grenade went off. The sound was deafening, the flash blinding. A wave of concussive force washed over them. Ellie's ears rang, but her vision cleared in a second. Years of exposure had built a tolerance. 4 men in dark tactical gear, now holding suppressed submachine guns, swarmed through the shattered doors. They moved with the fluid, predatory grace of professionals. They were not mercenaries. They were Tier 1 operators. Hemlock had sent his best. One of them spotted their position. He raised his weapon. Davis, still dazed, tried to bring his pistol up. He was too slow. Ellie moved. She kicked the bottom of the cart, sending it rolling toward the advancing operator. It slammed into him, knocking him off balance. In that split second of opportunity, she was on her feet. She launched herself over the cart, the trauma shear held in a reverse grip. She landed on the operator, her weight and momentum carrying him to the ground. He was bigger, stronger, but she was faster. Her left hand slammed his weapon away. Her right hand, holding the shear, found the soft spot under his jaw. She drove the point home with a vicious, practiced thrust. He gurgled, his body convulsing. 1 down. The other 3 operators reacted instantly. They turned their weapons on her. Ellie rolled, using the dead man's body as a shield. Bullets thudded into the corpse, the suppressed reports barely audible over the ringing in her ears. She grabbed the dead man's sidearm, a high-caliber pistol from his thigh rig. She came up firing. 2 shots, center mass. The second operator stumbled back, a look of surprise on his face before he collapsed. Davis was back in the fight. He fired from behind the cart, his shots providing covering fire, forcing the remaining 2 operators to seek cover behind a bank of waiting room chairs. "Reloading!" Davis yelled. "Covering!" Ellie shouted back, the military exchange as natural to her as breathing. She moved, a ghost in the chaotic ER. She vaulted over a desk, using the chaos she had created to flank them. She saw one of the operators looking towards Davis's position, preparing to advance. She lined up her shot. Squeeze, don't pull. Control your breathing. The mantra of the sniper. The shot was perfect. The third operator crumpled without a sound. The last man standing realized he was alone. He made a run for the hallway leading deeper into the hospital, towards the trauma bays, towards the Admiral. "He's making a break for Thorne," Ellie yelled. She took off after him, her legs pumped, her body a missile of pure intent. The hospital hallway was a kill zone, a long, straight corridor. The operator was fast. He glanced back, saw her coming, and raised his weapon to fire. A single, unsuppressed gunshot echoed from the far end of the hall. It was louder, deeper than the others. The operator's head snapped back, and he fell like a puppet with its strings cut. Ellie skidded to a stop, her borrowed pistol raised, scanning for the source of the shot. At the far end of the hall, standing by the entrance to the trauma bays, was Major Kincaid. His rifle was smoking. "Threat neutralized," Kincaid said into his comms, his voice steady. The fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. Silence descended on the ER, broken only by the distant panicked shouts of staff and the insistent blare of the code silver alarm. Ellie stood over the body of the last operator, her chest heaving, not from exertion, but from the adrenaline crash. The cold, brutal reality of what she had just done settled over her. She had killed 3 men in the place she had chosen as her sanctuary. She had brought the war home. Davis approached her, his face pale, his eyes wide with awe. I've never seen anything like that," he stammered. What are you?" Before she could answer, Dr. Evans appeared. He had witnessed the entire firefight from the relative safety of a doorway. His face was ashen. His immaculate white coat was spattered with blood from a wounded patient he had tried to help drag to cover. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the destruction in his ER. Then he looked at Ellie, at the pistol in her hand, at the blood on her scrubs, at the cold, lethal focus in her eyes. The arrogance was gone. The condescension was gone. All that was left was a profound, humbling shock. He started, his voice a dry croak. I'm sorry. It was not an apology for one thing. It was an apology for everything. For the humiliation, the condescension, the complete and utter failure to see the truth that had been standing in front of him all along. For what I said, he continued, his voice cracking, for how I treated you, I had no idea. Ellie looked at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't have the energy for anger or forgiveness. She just felt tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that had been 15 years in the making. It doesn't matter now, she said, her voice flat. She ejected the magazine from the pistol, checked the chamber, and placed the weapon on a nearby counter. The soldier's work was done. For now. Jarek's voice crackled from the tablet he had left on the nurse's station. Elena, report. She picked it up. 4 hostiles neutralized at the ER entrance. The area is secure. Copy that, Jarek replied. But you're not done. I've got another team. 2 men. They didn't come through the front. They used the service tunnels. They're coming up from the basement. They're 1 floor below you and heading for the stairs. Of course, a 2-pronged attack. A classic pincer movement. The frontal assault was just a diversion. Where's the nearest stairwell? She asked Kincaid as he jogged up to them. 30 meters down that hall, he said, pointing. They'll be trying to get to this floor and come at you from behind, Ellie analyzed. You need to hold your position, guard the Admiral. What are you going to do? Kincaid asked. I'm going hunting, she said. She started for the stairwell, her mind already working the problem, the basement, the place she had sent the civilians, Maria. A new, sharper fear cut through her. She broke into a run, her footsteps echoing in the unnervingly silent hospital. The stairwell door was propped open, a bad sign. It meant they were trying to move quickly and quietly. She paused at the door, listening. Nothing. She entered the stairwell, her movements silent, hugging the wall. The borrowed pistol was back in her hand. The concrete steps descended into shadows. She heard a noise from below, a muffled shout. A woman's scream, quickly cut off. Maria. Ellie descended the stairs, not running, but flowing, a shadow pouring down into the darkness. She held the pistol in a 2-handed grip, the weapon an extension of her will. She reached the basement level. The door was ajar. Through the crack she could see the entrance to the cafeteria. The doors were closed but not locked. The assassins had gotten there first. She heard a man's voice, cold and professional. We're not here for you. We just want the layout of the floor above. Tell us the quickest way to the trauma wing, and we'll be gone. Then Maria's voice, tight with fear but defiant. I'm not telling you anything. A sharp slap. Maria's cry of pain, rage cold and pure, flooded Ellie's system. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in years. It sharpened her focus to a razor's edge. She had to end this, now. She couldn't breach the door. They had hostages. She needed a distraction. Her eyes scanned the basement hallway. Maintenance closet. Fire alarm pull station. She moved to the fire alarm. She didn't pull it. That would bring first responders, more civilians into the hot zone. Instead, she opened the casing with the point of the trauma shear. Inside was a simple circuit. She knew what to do. With the metal of the shear, she shorted 2 of the contacts. The effect was not the blaring alarm. It was a loud electrical pop, a shower of sparks, and a sudden plume of thick, acrid smoke from the fried wiring. What was that? One of the men inside the cafeteria said. Fire? The other asked. Stay here with them. I'll check it out. Ellie flattened herself against the wall as the cafeteria door opened. A man in an orderly's uniform stepped out, a suppressed pistol in his hand. He looked down the hall at the smoke, his brow furrowed. He never saw her. She stepped out from the shadows behind him, a ghost. She didn't use the gun. It was too loud, even suppressed. She used the shear, a single, silent, brutal strike to the base of the skull. He dropped without a sound. She took his weapon and his radio, then moved to the cafeteria door. She could hear the remaining assassin getting agitated. What's taking so long? Marco, report. Silence. Marco! Ellie brought the dead man's radio to her lips. She keyed the mic twice, the prearranged signal for all clear. An old trick, but it often worked. What is it? The man inside demanded. She didn't answer. The silence would draw him out. She heard him curse. Useless. Stay put, all of you, he ordered the hostages. The door opened again. The second man, also in an orderly's uniform, peered out, his weapon raised. Ellie was no longer in the hallway. She had climbed onto a stack of pallets next to the door. She was above him. As he stepped out, she dropped. She landed on his shoulders, her legs scissoring around his neck. Her momentum carried them both to the floor. The pistol flew from his grasp. He was strong, fighting back, his hands clawing at her legs, but she had the leverage. She squeezed, applying pressure to his carotid arteries. It was a silent, desperate struggle. He thrashed, his face purpling. His lungs burned for air he couldn't get. Ellie held on, her face a mask of grim determination. This was the ugly, intimate reality of her old life, not the clean shots from a distance, the visceral, hands-on business of killing. His struggles weakened. After 10 seconds that felt like an eternity, he went limp. She released him, gasping for air herself. She rolled off him, her body trembling with adrenaline. The cafeteria was filled with terrified staff and patients, huddled against the far wall. Maria was there, a red handprint on her cheek, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Ellie got to her feet, ignoring them all. She grabbed the second radio. "Jarek," she said, her voice a ragged whisper. "Basement is secure. 2 hostiles neutralized." "Copy, Elena." His voice came back calm as ever. "My team is 2 minutes out. Hold your position. It's over." It was over. The fight was over. But for her, the battle was just beginning. She walked out of the cafeteria and slid down the wall, the 2 pistols clattering to the floor beside her. She buried her face in her hands, the smell of cordite and blood thick in her nostrils. The Valkyrie was back, and she didn't know how to be anyone else anymore. The aftermath was a blur of controlled official chaos. Jarek's tactical team, clad in black, swarmed the hospital, securing every floor. Police and federal agents followed, taping off crime scenes, interviewing witnesses. Ellie remained in the basement, a ghost at her own party. She was given a wide berth. The hospital staff who had seen her, who had been saved by her, looked at her with a new, fearful respect. She was no longer one of them. She was something other. Jarek found her an hour later. He brought her a bottle of water. She took it, her hands steady now. "You did good work today, Elena," he said, sitting on the floor across from her. 6 men are dead," she replied, her voice empty. 6 men who came here to commit murder, he countered. "You saved dozens of lives, including the Admiral's. Hemlock is in custody. He panicked when his teams went dark, tried to shred files. We got him. It was a clean sweep, a successful operation. She should have felt something, relief, vindication, but she just felt hollow." "What happens now?" she asked. "For you?" Jarek sighed. "That's the difficult question. Alara Vance is a compromised identity. You can't be a nurse here anymore. You can't be a nurse anywhere, probably. The story is already leaking. The angel of the ER, the hero nurse who fought off assassins. It'll be a media storm. Her quiet life obliterated." "I can build you a new identity," Jarek offered. "A new life. We're very good at it. Send you somewhere quiet. A librarian in Vermont, a baker in Oregon. Your choice. Go back into hiding. Rebuild the cage." The thought was suffocating. "Or," Jarek said, his voice changing, "there's another option." Later, they took her to see the Admiral. He was in a secure room on the top floor, sitting up in bed, looking tired but lucid. The wildness was gone from his eyes. Major Kincaid stood guard at the door. He nodded at Ellie as she entered, a gesture of profound respect. Admiral Thorne looked at her, and his eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raspy, "for bringing this to you, for destroying the peace you found." "You didn't," Ellie said. "It was never really peace. It was just a pause." He nodded, understanding. "I never got to thank you," he said. "That day, in the valley, you carried me for 2 miles, through enemy fire. You were wounded yourself." He gestured to her arm. "The shrapnel that hit you, it was from a grenade meant for me." She didn't respond. She just listened. "They told me everyone was gone," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. They said Valkyrie went down fighting, covering the retreat of a non-existent team. They built a legend around your sacrifice. I never knew you survived. It was better that way, she said. Valkyrie needed to die so Elena Petrova could live, and Elena Petrova needed to die so Ellie Vance could rest. There is no rest for people like us, is there? The Admiral said softly. Only the mission. Jarek cleared his throat from the doorway. The government owes you, Elena, a debt that can never truly be repaid, but we can try. He stepped forward. We want to offer you a new position, not in the field, not as an operator. Your fighting days are over unless you choose otherwise. Ellie looked at him, waiting. We want you to teach, Jarek said. Head instructor at the farm, the training facility for all our new intelligence and special operations recruits. Your skills, your experience, they're a national asset. Don't let them die in a quiet life you have to pretend to enjoy. Pass them on. Forge the next generation of Valkyries. An instructor, not a killer, a shepherd, a guide. It was a third option, not hiding, not fighting, but teaching. Integrating the two halves of her soul, the warrior and the healer, the one who took life, and the one who saved it. She thought of the young resident fumbling with the defibrillator, of Davis, brave but outmatched, of the soldiers, strong but inflexible in their thinking. She could make them better. She could teach them how to survive, how to think, how to see the whole board. She looked at her hands, the hands that had trembled with feigned anxiety, the hands that had performed perfect compressions, the hands that had ended 6 lives. Could they be used to build instead of break? She looked at Admiral Thorne, the living embodiment of her past. She looked at Jarek, the architect of her future. A choice. For the first time in 15 years, she had a real choice. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips. When do I start? She asked, 1 year later. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. The training ground, known only as the farm, was nestled deep in the Virginia mountains, a world away from the sterile corridors of a hospital. Elena Petrova stood on an observation platform, watching a team of recruits navigate a complex urban combat simulation. She wore simple cargo pants and a black instructor's polo shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, practical ponytail. She no longer hunched. She stood with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was. The scar on her forearm was visible, no longer a source of shame, but a part of her story. Below, the recruits were making a mess of it. They were communicating poorly, moving without efficiency. They were relying on their gear, not their minds. She keyed the microphone on her console. Her voice, calm and authoritative, boomed across the training ground. "Freeze exercise," she commanded. The recruits stopped, panting, looking up at her platform. "You're all dead," she said, her voice flat. "The sniper on the roof took out your point man 30 seconds ago. The IED you failed to spot just vaporized your medic, and the hostage you're here to rescue? She was the one who sold you out." She let the silence hang in the air. "You think this is about shooting straight? About being strong? This is about seeing. It's about knowing. It's about understanding that the biggest threat is the one you underestimate." She pointed to one of the buildings. "The janitor you ignored? He was their spotter. The broken security camera you walked right under. It was feeding a live stream to their commander. Details. It is always about the details." She paused, her gaze sweeping over their humbled faces. "You want to survive out there? You have to learn to be 2 people at once. The person they see, and the person you really are. You hide your strength in weakness, you hide your sight in plain view, you become a ghost." She leaned forward, her voice dropping, becoming more personal. "The world is not a safe place. It is a hospital full of people who need saving, and killers hiding in plain sight. Your job is to be the one who can tell the difference, and be ready to do what is necessary." She saw a flicker of understanding in some of their eyes, the beginning of wisdom. She had found her new purpose, not in the silence of a life she didn't want, but in the voices of those she would prepare for the darkness. She was no longer Valkyrie, the lone warrior. She was the Forge. And for the first time since the fire and smoke of the Al-Qadir Valley, Elena Petrova felt something that resembled peace. It was not quiet. It was not gentle. It was sharp and focused and alive. It was the piece of a weapon that has finally found its true purpose. Not to destroy, but to create. To build a shield out of the warriors of the future. She keyed the mic one last time. "All right," she said, a hint of a smile in her voice. "Let's run it again, from the top. And this time, try not to die in the first 5 minutes." The training had just begun.